Imagine standing in the sands of Egypt thousands of years ago, when the desert winds whispered secrets that even time itself dared not erase. In that ancient world, among the pharaohs who commanded armies and carved their names in stone, there emerged a man so unusual, so extraordinary that his memory would outlive kings. He was not just remembered as a great builder, not just celebrated as a physician, but revered as a being who seemed to straddle the line between human and divine. His name was Imhotep, and though centuries have passed since he walked the earth, the aura of mystery around him has only grown stronger. Some believed he was no ordinary mortal, but the first avatar of sacred wisdom, a vessel of cosmic knowledge destined to shape the destiny of mankind. Stories of Imhotep often begin with paradox. He was born into a time when power was measured in armies and wealth in gold, yet he held neither. His weapon was his mind. His legacy, unlike the fleeting glories of conquerors, was built upon ideas, structures that touched not just stone but the invisible laws of the universe. Some traditions later equated him with Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great, the legendary father of Hermetic philosophy. And here lies the first question that stirs curiosity. Was Imhotep a brilliant man who rose above his age? Or was he something more, a luminous soul channeling truths far beyond the grasp of ordinary mortals? The historical record offers only fragments. What we know places him during Egypt's third dynasty, serving as vizier to Pharaoh Djoser around 2700 BCE. Unlike the monarchs who built their power with force, Imhotep designed his legacy through vision. He looked at the simple tombs of mud brick that had housed Egypt's rulers for generations and dared to imagine something the world had never seen. A structure that would reach toward the heavens in ascending layers, a stairway not just of stone, but of spirit. That vision became the step pyramid at Saqqara, the very first pyramid of Egypt, the first monument of stone that would defy centuries of time. What compelled him to invent such a form? Was it mere engineering genius, or was it an attempt to mirror the hidden geometry of the cosmos? To the ancient Egyptians, a tomb was never simply a tomb. It was a gateway. Death was not the end, but a passage, and architecture was the language through which humanity spoke to eternity. In raising Djoser's pyramid, Imhotep did more than build a resting place for a king. He constructed a spiritual engine, a machine of initiation, a ladder for the soul to ascend. Each step echoed the rays of the sun god Ra, guiding the pharaoh from earth into celestial realms. Beneath its massive layers lay hidden corridors, chambers adorned with symbols and designs so intricate they seemed almost to whisper secrets to those prepared to listen. It was architecture, yes, but it was also philosophy written in stone. Imhotep was more than an architect of monuments. He was an architect of balance, a healer who treated the human body not as a vessel to be punished by the gods, but as a living system with its own rhythms, its own hidden laws. While others interpreted sickness as divine wrath, Imhotep recorded symptoms, applied remedies, and sought patterns in the body, much like he did in the stars. He understood that healing required harmony between body, mind, and the unseen forces of the cosmos. Egyptian texts written centuries later still echoed his methods, describing surgeries, herbal remedies, even the use of honey to cleanse wounds, a practice that modern medicine now recognizes as antibacterial. It is little wonder that later generations, especially the Greeks, revered him as Asclepius, their god of healing. But Imhotep was no ordinary physician. He was also a priest of Ptah, the creator god, a custodian of mysteries that stretched beyond life and death. In Egypt, knowledge was not scattered in books for anyone to read. It was passed through initiation, whispered in temples, preserved for the worthy. Within these sanctuaries, Imhotep is said to have guided students into the hidden sciences: astronomy, mathematics, alchemy, and the laws of spirit. Imagine stepping into those halls where the very architecture was designed to magnify resonance, where shadows aligned with the stars, where geometry revealed truths that words could never capture. To enter was to step into a living university of the cosmos, and Imhotep was its master. His story did not end with death. In fact, death only amplified his legend. Centuries later, his name was not simply remembered but venerated. He became a demigod, then a god. The Egyptians honored him with temples, sanctuaries, and hymns. The Greeks wove him into their pantheon, merging him with their deities of wisdom and healing. Some whispered that Hermes Trismegistus, the mythical sage whose writings shaped Western esotericism, was none other than Imhotep reborn, or perhaps never truly gone. For in the Hermetic tradition, wisdom is eternal, carried not by one man alone, but through a lineage of souls who guard the secrets of existence. What made Imhotep so unique? Was it his ability to blend science and spirituality into one vision? Was it his understanding of cosmic law, a knowledge so profound that it continues to echo in the philosophies of today? Or was he, as some believe, a messenger of truths not born of earth at all? These questions linger like the shadows of pyramids at dusk, hinting at something just beyond our reach. As centuries unfolded, the figure of Imhotep grew larger than life. Time did not erode his memory. Instead, it magnified it. By the New Kingdom, nearly 1,000 years after his passing, Egyptians no longer saw him merely as a man. They invoked him as a god of wisdom, medicine, and sacred knowledge. Temples were raised in his honor, pilgrims traveled to seek his blessings, and priests guarded his legacy with a reverence once reserved only for the gods of creation themselves. To live so far beyond one's own death is rare, but to be deified, this was something reserved for the few who had transcended the boundaries of human achievement. And Imhotep had done precisely that. In their mythology, he began to merge with Thoth, the divine scribe of the gods, the master of language, magic, and cosmic law. Thoth was the one who measured the heavens and dictated the rhythm of the stars. To say Imhotep was linked to Thoth was to suggest that he too carried the secret blueprint of creation within his mind. And it was this association that centuries later gave birth to one of the most enigmatic figures in esoteric tradition: Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great sage. Legends describe Hermes as a teacher who revealed that the universe itself is alive, governed by principles both visible and invisible. A wisdom that would influence Greek philosophers, early Christian mystics, alchemists, and magicians through the ages. Yet when we peel back the layers of myth, a startling possibility emerges. What if Hermes was none other than Imhotep, remembered through a different name, his teachings disguised in allegory to survive the shifting tides of history? The Hermetic writings, said to descend from Hermes, speak of a unity between the macrocosm and the microcosm, the vast universe reflected within the human soul. They whisper of vibration, polarity, rhythm, and the hidden correspondences that bind all things. Ideas that might seem revolutionary today were already present in Egypt millennia earlier, woven into the stones of temples and whispered in rituals only initiates could witness. If Hermes was a symbol, then Imhotep may have been his prototype, the living man who first embodied that synthesis of medicine, architecture, and divine law. And in Egypt, being thrice great was not just a title, it meant mastery of the three sacred sciences. Imhotep healed the sick, raised monuments that defied time, and penetrated the mysteries of the spirit. Who else could truly claim such a name? Greek philosophers who studied in Egypt, Pythagoras, Plato, and others may well have walked through halls that echoed with Imhotep's wisdom. Even if they never knew his name, they encountered his teachings distilled through the priesthoods that carried them forward. Mathematics, geometry, and harmony were never just academic exercises in Egypt. They were the language of the cosmos, keys to unlock the laws that held creation together. To learn them was to learn the divine alphabet, and perhaps this is why Plato would later write of Atlantis, that lost civilization whose knowledge seemed to anticipate Egypt itself. Could Imhotep have been a custodian of that forgotten legacy, carrying fragments of truths older than Egypt into a new age? But his influence was not confined to philosophers. Some believe that echoes of his wisdom reached as far as the Essenes, the mystical Jewish sect living near the Dead Sea, whose practices deeply shaped early Western spirituality. The Essenes were healers, astrologers, and seekers of hidden truth. They understood the body as a temple, the stars as guides, and the soul as something that could be purified through knowledge and ritual. These parallels to Hermetic and Egyptian thought are striking. Could it be that the flame lit by Imhotep smoldered quietly through centuries, kept alive in hidden communities waiting for the right moment to rise again? And yet, for all the temples, hymns, and philosophies built in his honor, one mystery endures. His tomb has never been found. Pharaohs' tombs have been uncovered, revealing treasures of unimaginable wealth. But Imhotep's resting place remains hidden, elusive, almost as if deliberately concealed. Some suggest his burial was never meant to be discovered, that his initiates protected it from prying eyes, for within it might lie something the world was not ready to face. Perhaps not gold or jewels, but something far greater. Knowledge capable of transforming humanity's understanding of reality itself. For if Imhotep was the earthly embodiment of Hermes, then his tomb could hold the keys to the very laws of the cosmos. The question then becomes, what exactly did he know? To say he was an architect is true but insufficient. To call him a physician captures part of the picture but not the whole. Imhotep seemed to possess an understanding that bound together matter and spirit, stone and star, body and soul. He knew that geometry was not only about shapes but about vibration, proportion, and resonance, the hidden patterns of the universe etched into form. His designs were not just buildings but harmonies in stone, living instruments tuned to cosmic laws. Some have even called the step pyramid not a tomb, but a machine for consciousness, guiding the soul on its path to higher realms. If so, Imhotep was not merely building for a king. He was experimenting with the architecture of eternity. Here lies the paradox that makes his story timeless. He lived as a man, yet his legacy suggests he was more than human. He healed the body but also addressed the soul. He raised stone monuments yet left behind ideas that outlived them all. He disappeared into death yet rose as a god. And so, Imhotep became not just a figure of history but an archetype, a reminder that human beings at their highest can touch the divine. His story beckons us to ask the question, are we merely flesh and bone, or are we two architects of something greater, builders of invisible pyramids that ascend toward the eternal? If we follow the trail of Imhotep's legacy, we find ourselves confronted with a question that has haunted seekers for centuries. Where did his wisdom come from? Was it the natural brilliance of a singular mind? Or was he the inheritor of something far older, fragments of knowledge passed down from civilizations long forgotten? Some scholars have dared to suggest that Imhotep may have been one of the last guardians of truths preserved from a vanished world. Atlantis, or another ancient culture erased by time yet remembered faintly in myth. If that is true, then his architecture, his medicine, and his philosophy were not mere innovations, but the preservation of a sacred science that had once illuminated the earth. The pyramids themselves seem to hint at such origins. Far more than tombs, they were aligned with constellations, calibrated to solstices, and infused with geometry that mirrored the stars. They were not just monuments, they were harmonics in stone, resonant with the frequencies of the cosmos. Imhotep's step pyramid was the first expression of this vision, a prototype that opened the door for the grand pyramids of Giza that followed. To stand before those structures is to feel that they are not only physical but vibrational. Instruments designed to tune human consciousness to higher states. Could Imhotep have known this? Could he have encoded into stone the principles of transformation itself? What we know of Egyptian knowledge supports such an idea. Their temples were not built merely as places of worship, but as living schools, spiritual universities where only the initiated could pass through the deeper doors. Inscriptions, symbols, and architectural proportions were not arbitrary decoration but keys to mysteries. The uninitiated might see only columns and hieroglyphs, while the trained eye would perceive layers of cosmic truth hidden within the patterns. If Imhotep was indeed the master of this system, then he was not only a priest but the architect of an entire worldview, one that saw the cosmos as a living organism and humanity as a reflection of its eternal laws. Centuries later, the Hermetic texts would crystallize these ideas into principles that still captivate minds today. The law of correspondence, as above, so below. The principle of vibration, that nothing rests and everything moves. The law of polarity, that opposites are but extremes of the same essence. These were not abstract philosophies, but practical tools for transformation. They described how energy flows, how consciousness shapes reality, how spirit and matter are bound in a dance of eternal rhythm. If Hermeticism was the flower, then perhaps Imhotep was the seed. His temples and pyramids might have been the first codex written not in words but in stone. And yet, as the centuries turned, Egypt changed. Dynasties rose and fell, conquerors came and went, and the purity of the ancient mysteries began to fade. The Greeks arrived, eager to drink from the Nile of wisdom. They absorbed fragments of Egyptian science and philosophy, reinterpreting it through their own language and culture. Then came the Romans, who sought power more than knowledge. And with them, the slow erosion of Egypt's spiritual heart. The great libraries were burned, temples fell to dust, and much of the sacred knowledge was scattered to the winds. But not all was lost. Pieces survived. Hidden in the works of alchemists, embedded in medieval esoteric traditions, whispered through secret societies that guarded fragments of the old light. Imhotep's flame never truly went out. It simply moved underground, waiting for seekers to find it again. But there is an even deeper mystery, one that refuses to leave the imagination: the missing tomb of Imhotep. Unlike pharaohs whose graves were filled with treasure and quickly looted, his has never been discovered. Was it destroyed, or has it been concealed with purpose? Some believe his disciples chose to hide it, knowing that within lay more than relics. Perhaps sacred scrolls inscribed with cosmic laws, maps of forgotten knowledge, or devices we cannot yet comprehend. The possibility is staggering. What if somewhere in Egypt, still buried beneath sand and stone, lies the key to unlocking truths that could change everything we think we know about life, death, and the universe itself? And this raises another question. Did Imhotep himself transcend death? In Egyptian belief, the greatest sages could become Akh, enlightened beings who surpassed mortality and continued to act in the world of the living. Later, Hermetic texts speak of immortal masters, guides who reincarnate across centuries to keep the wisdom alive. If Hermes Trismegistus was Imhotep, then perhaps he never truly left. Perhaps his presence flows through history, wearing different names, appearing in different forms, but always carrying the same essence: a reminder that humanity's potential is far greater than we dare imagine. Even if we take this symbolically, the implications are profound. For when we speak of Imhotep's return, it may not mean the return of a man, but the return of his ideas. And in many ways, we are seeing this unfold today. Science and spirituality, long divorced, are beginning to reunite. Quantum physics now speaks of a universe woven by vibration, consciousness influencing matter, and hidden dimensions shaping reality. Echoes of what the Hermeticists proclaimed and what Imhotep may have known millennia ago. Medicine is rediscovering holistic approaches, recognizing the interplay between body, mind, and energy. The very principles Imhotep applied as the first physician. Architects experiment with sacred geometry again, seeking resonance in form and function. It is as if the wisdom buried in the sands of Egypt is slowly rising like the sun at dawn, illuminating us once more. Yet such knowledge has always been contested. Power fears wisdom because wisdom liberates. Throughout history, truths have been concealed, texts destroyed, voices silenced. If Imhotep's teachings truly contained the keys to existence, it would be no surprise that forces sought to hide them, preserving them only for the few who dared seek beyond the surface of life. But truth cannot be erased. It can only be hidden. Like the pyramids, it waits patiently for eyes ready to see. And so, the figure of Imhotep looms before us, neither man nor myth, but something in between. He was a healer, an architect, a sage, a god. He was a bridge between matter and spirit, science and faith, earth and sky. He is the eternal archetype of the one who unites opposites, who shows us that the human spirit, when aligned with the cosmos, can achieve the miraculous. His story is not only a tale of the past. It is a mirror held before us, asking, what pyramids are we building in our own lives? What invisible monuments are we raising, not of stone, but of knowledge, vision, and spirit? When we look back across the ages, we often think of immortality as a matter of stone. The towering pyramids, the carved obelisks, the statues that have stood against the winds of time. For the pharaohs, this was the path to eternity. To build monuments so vast that their names could never be forgotten. But Imhotep chose another way. His immortality did not rest solely in limestone blocks or hieroglyphs etched on temple walls. His legacy was knowledge, and knowledge, unlike stone, cannot be broken. It can be scattered, hidden, misinterpreted, but never destroyed. That is why his memory lives on, woven into Greek philosophy, Hermetic texts, mystical traditions, and even the frameworks of science we explore today. Imagine for a moment that Imhotep could see our present age. He would recognize, perhaps with a quiet smile, how humanity is rediscovering truths he once embodied. In medicine, we are moving beyond the mechanical view of the body into the understanding that mind, energy, and environment play critical roles in healing. From sound therapies to the science of epigenetics, we are awakening to the idea that health is harmony. An idea he taught millennia ago when he treated the body as a vessel of cosmic balance. In architecture, the quest for resonance is returning. Structures that breathe with light, proportion, and sacred geometry, echoing the same principles that guided his hand at Saqqara. And in spirituality, perhaps more than ever, people are seeking to bridge science and mysticism, exploring consciousness not as a byproduct of matter, but as the foundation of reality itself. This is Imhotep's wisdom resurfacing, not as dogma, but as living truth. But his story is also a cautionary one. Throughout history, whenever great knowledge has emerged, forces have risen to conceal or control it. The burning of the Library of Alexandria, the destruction of temples, the suppression of mystical traditions. All of these were attempts to silence voices that carried echoes of the same current. If Imhotep's teachings held the keys to life, death, and the architecture of the cosmos, it is not surprising that such knowledge would be hidden, locked away for fear of misuse. Even now we must ask ourselves, are we prepared to handle truths that dissolve the boundaries between matter and spirit, life and death, self and universe? Or would we repeat the errors of the past, seeking to hoard wisdom for power rather than to elevate humanity? And yet truth has a way of returning. It rises like the Nile, flooding the banks of history when the time is right. Perhaps this is what is happening in our age, the return of Imhotep's spirit not as a man but as a current of thought. For in every era, when humanity teeters on the edge of transformation, teachers emerge, not to impose answers but to awaken questions. Imhotep's story is the echo of one such awakening, a reminder that enlightenment is not a single event but an eternal rhythm, returning again and again like the cycles of the stars. This is why his missing tomb fascinates us so much. It is not only the possibility of treasures or artifacts, but the symbolism of something concealed, waiting to be revealed when humanity is ready. Whether hidden beneath the sands or existing only in legend, his tomb is a metaphor for the inner chamber within each of us, where wisdom lies dormant until we choose to uncover it. To seek Imhotep's tomb is, in a way, to seek ourselves, to rediscover the architect within, the healer within, the sage within. So who was Imhotep truly? Was he a man of extraordinary genius? A prophet carrying fragments of forgotten civilizations? An immortal soul reborn through ages under many names? Or was he all of these at once, a mirror reflecting back to us the possibility of our own higher nature? The truth may never be pinned down, because Imhotep is larger than history. He is a symbol, an archetype of the eternal seeker, the one who unites opposites and builds bridges between worlds. And as long as we are searching for meaning, for harmony, for connection to the great mystery of existence, Imhotep walks with us. At the heart of his story lies a challenge. The pyramids he built were not just steps to the heavens for pharaohs. They are metaphors for the inner pyramid each of us must construct. Brick by brick, thought by thought, act by act, we raise our own stairway toward the divine. It is not built of stone, but of choices. It does not rise in the desert, but in the soul. And like Imhotep, we too are called to be architects, not only of monuments, but of harmony, healing, and wisdom. The sands of Egypt may never give up the location of his resting place. But perhaps that is the point. For his true resting place is not in stone, but in the human imagination, in the eternal quest to understand the invisible laws that weave reality together. His story whispers to us, seek, question, build, heal, and above all, remember that the universe is not dead matter, but a living mystery waiting to be understood. And so, as we close this journey, let us remember Imhotep not only as the man who built the first pyramid, but as the eternal archetype of the sage, a being who showed us that wisdom and creativity, science and spirit, body and cosmos are not separate paths, but one. His life reminds us that the greatest monuments are not carved in stone, but written in consciousness. And perhaps in seeking him, we are really seeking the divine blueprint already hidden within ourselves.